Good afternoon. As said, my name is Erel. I'm an ex-captain in the Israeli Navy. 23 years in the Navy. And I've been asked to speak about a naval battle that I participated in quite a few years ago, more than 40 years ago. But it's unique. It's the Battle of Latakia. And if we get the presentation, it'll be even easier. It's unique because it's the first, and not the only, but the first battle fought on both sides with missiles. Until that time, it was guns. There were some cases where one side had some form of cruise missile that did work. Unfortunately, even it happened to us. But this is the first time in naval history that missiles were fought on both sides, and it's, as you say, a completely different ball game. I'll give some background to how we got to that point. The Israeli Navy is not the senior Navy. It's the best, but it's not the senior Navy in our armed forces. Because we're a landlocked country, there is one open opening. It's to the sea. At that time, we didn't have any peace with any of our neighbors as we have now. So there was Egypt on the south, Jordan and Syria on the east, and Lebanon up north. And the only way out, which was free, is from the sea. But there's only about 180 kilometers of coastline. Still, two main ports, and most of the export and import to and from Israel goes by sea. Very little goes by planes. Well, of course, tourists come by planes, and businessmen come by plane, and you came by plane. But the economy of the country relies on open sea lines of communications. But tell that to the army generals. They don't know about that. So, and we had a tough time in the early years of the Navy, because we had to make do with World War II surplus that we got from the British, from the Italians, and so forth. We had World War II destroyers, we had World War II submarines, we had World War II torpedo boats, and we had, well, we also had commander units, but again, the tactics were what they learned from the Italians from World War II. Now, on the other hand, the Egyptians and the Syrians were being armed by the Soviet Union. This small point on Earth was one of the focal points between East and West during the Cold War, and the Soviets were arming Syria and Egypt, mainly Egypt, and on the naval side, which was very tough for us, they were arming them with post-World War destroyers. They're called, at that time, they were called Scori destroyers, and they were our main threat. I'm talking about the 60s. So, Eastern Mediterranean, and as I said, just 180 kilometers of coastline, Egypt on one side, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon all around. Most of the population lives near the coast, and that's why I mentioned that the destroyers were a threat, because they could easily come and bombard the coast, and all the infrastructure is there. Except for Jerusalem, everything is on the coast. Exports come and go back by the sea, and we were operating World War II type combatants. This is the Scori. I should have showed Lorit. Naval threat, Scori destroyers, believe me. And we didn't have anything against that. What we tried to do is develop something that can reach further than their guns. Their guns were something like, at best, 14, 16 kilometers. I don't know if it would be very accurate, but quite a distance for us. We didn't have anything that we could approach the destroyer with it. So the idea, the Navy actually took an experiment that was being done by one of the security or defense industries. Actually, they were trying to develop a rocket, a guided rocket. The word missile at that time wasn't too well known. For the artillery. For artillery. They didn't like it. They said it's not enough explosives in it. There's something like 150 kilos of explosives. So the Navy said, we'll try. Let us try and develop it. And the development went on. And remember, there's no such thing as missiles at sea at that time, anti-ship missiles. There was the Styx. Styx is a Russian cruise missile, which was used by the Soviets as an extension of the shore gunners because they were afraid of invasion. Rightfully so. That's what happened. If you know your history, even during the revolution, the Americans who sided with one side, with the anti-communists, were trying to raise an invasion to Russia. So their idea was, this was a half a ton of explosives, and it could go for 50 kilometers. But it wasn't really a anti-ship cruise missile. So the idea of the Gabriel, as we called it, this missile, was being developed, and we needed something to carry it. What the Russians did was they took a torpedo boat and put what they could, 2 Styx missiles on it, and nothing else. I mean, there's a radar which was also used by the torpedo boat, and I'm not even sure that they could detect any targets at the maximum range of the missile. But as I said, it was as an extension of the shore of the coastal defense. So maybe they'd get some information from outside and get out and shoot the missile, which they actually did, and we painfully learned about it right after the Six-Day War, which I'll come to in a minute, when we, with our World War II destroyer, we were patrolling, and there was a ceasefire, but they couldn't resist the temptation, and a vessel like this came out, actually 2 vessels, shot 4 missiles at the destroyer sunk with 39 lives. Very painful lesson for us. Now, this was not the cause for what we were developing. What we started to develop was back in the 60s, long before the 67 war. Actually, the 67 war between Israel and all the neighboring countries began almost by accident, I would say. At least this is my interpretation. Nasser, who was at that time president of Egypt, and in a way a leader of the Arab world at that time, at least leader of the Arab world against Israel, on one of his outings, I would say, demanded that the UN leave their peacekeeping mission, and they did. I don't think he expected. What happened was that we suddenly had the Egyptians on our borders without the UN, and began something like 3 weeks of waiting, deliberating what to do. It ended with a decision to attack before the Arabs did anything, and that became the Six-Day War. Total surprise, good on our side, of course, and we found ourselves, in a minute I'll talk about this, we found ourselves with much longer borders. the idea here is to try and compare the way the Russians developed their missile boats and our concept. As I said, the Russians simply converted a torpedo boat, took out the torpedoes, put these missiles on it. It became a very loaded vessel, not very good at anything except going out from shore, sending the missile, shooting the missile. Here we are talking about vessels that were adapted. Even we didn't develop these vessels. These SAR-type missile boats were based on a German hull, German Navy hull, which was a gunboat actually. I think they also had some torpedoes in it. It was a gunboat. It was built of wood because it was supposed to work in the Baltic. And in the Baltic, there's mines. So they were built of wood. We came to the Germans and said, we would like these same vessels because they were excellent vessels, very fast, good seakeeping, and still small, relatively small. Not relatively, small. This is a 240-ton fully loaded. This is small. Naval combatants come in sizes of thousands of tons, major combatants. So we asked them to do it in steel because it would have made for a lighter vessel than the wooden one. We don't have a problem with mines, at least at that time we didn't have a problem with mines. It's not that shallow here. And it gave us much more volume for what we wanted to carry on it. And the idea was to put these Gabriel missiles, these coffins are Gabriel missiles, remote controlled, in this case 40mm guns, anti-air, and for short range something 4,000 meters, also against surface. This is what is called SAR-2. The type is SAR. SAR in Israel, in Hebrew means tempest. They were superior in speed. They could do 40 knots. This one could do something like 30 knots. They had very good range. We said 30 hours at 30 knots. That means 900 miles. The ranges to our enemy ports are anything up to 250 miles. 900 miles means we could reach Italy, let's say. Very good seakeeping. This is, again, a very special hull. If we have time later, I can go into it. Excellent hull. And the main thing I should emphasize is the state-of-the-art surveillance system, electronic countermeasures, everything that the mines here could develop was put on these vessels. It was a completely different concept. And at the time the Gabriel was developed, the missile was developed, as I said, the main target was a destroyer. Then on one of the test firings, the wind, we were using it to shoot at one of our old destroyers that we intended to be sunk. The wind changed the aspect of the target. Of course, nobody was on the ship, and it was hull. I mean, the forward part was, and everybody who has seen a destroyer, it's a very narrow and has a flare. And there was a debate where if to shoot, because the missile wasn't intended against such a narrow target. The decision was to shoot. And it hit right where the anchor comes out. And then the engineers started checking if it was a freak thing, and it turned out that the seeker worked best if the target was smaller, up to a certain point. Of course, it has to be above the noise, the surface noise. But it had no problem. It was, instead of going around from fore and aft, and trying to decide where to hit, here it was very clear. So we understood that we had a weapon also against these small boats, and we checked it on an old torpedo boat. that was, in this time, it was operated by persons who, put it in forward 30 knots and jumped overboard, and somebody else. No, I'm serious. And they ran, and then when they were clear, a missile was fired at it, and by the time they got back, there was only some wood on the surface. So we knew we had a very good weapon, but as I said, only 20 kilometers. The Russians went a little further, took another torpedo boat. Another torpedo boat, but a better one. This is almost the size, it's smaller, almost the size of our vessel, but it could carry 6 missiles. And they also had remote-controlled anti-aircraft guns, even 30 millimeter, and a fire control radar. This is starting to be serious. So the focus, little by little, became, this is our target, not the destroyer, or on top of the destroyer.
And is that one sold to Egypt, or is it just the Russians that have it?
No. I'll come in a minute to the numbers. You'll be astounded by the numbers, but they were sold to Egypt and yeah. Okay. Now, you can see it says SAR 1. What happened was that after we placed an order for 12 of those SAR boats, 2 types actually, SAR 2 and SAR 3. The name SAR 2 came out because after we put the order, and these were built in Cherbourg because the Germans didn't want to be the ones who built arms for Israel. So the Cherbourg shipyard, which was almost bankrupt, this was very good business for them. So they got the license to build the boats. And I'm talking just the hull, because all the armaments, everything is done here in Israel. Was done here in Israel. What happened was that after they put the order, one of the many budget cuts that always happen when a government changes things, and they said, okay, we're cutting off 3 of your missile boats. And the Navy said, no, you don't. We'll decide what to do with the money. What happened was that the Navy simply starved itself, put everything on hold. This is just before 1967 war, because nobody expected this war, and decided that the 3 first boats would not be armed. Not be armed with the missiles and all that. Just these guns with men in the turrets, gunboats, and the idea was, and it worked, eventually we'll get more money and we'll make them missile boats. In parentheses, I'll say that what happened was that in '67 we had nothing against the other navies, and luckily for us, the Air Force and the Armed Forces did a fantastic job, and except for a submarine that tried to penetrate, nothing really happened on the naval side. So we were quite lucky, but again, this is the full missile boat. As you can see, by the way, it's very modular. We can have the missiles here, we can have another set of missiles here, or a gun here, and so forth. This is also something that had some bearing on what happened in '73, which I'm coming up to. This is the SAR 3. We had, as I said, 2 types of boats, SAR 2 and SAR 3. The SAR 1 was a fluke. The SAR 2 was with 40 millimeter guns, missiles, and anti-submarine. It had a sonar and even torpedoes, anti-submarine torpedoes. The SAR 3 was the main surface vessel. It could take 6 of these missiles, and a 76 millimeter remote control, again, 76 millimeter gun, which is quite a good gun, 16 kilometers. 76 is not much, but it was very accurate. It's also anti-aircraft, by the way, depending on what shells you're using. A point that I want to show here, because I'll get back to it later, over here, what you see is a 20 millimeter World War II Oerlikon. The reason it's there was the main problem we had in those years was not really with navies, but with the terrorists trying to infiltrate Israel and sometimes succeeding, and some of them through the sea. And these boats were used also for patrols against these missile boats. And one of them got into a skirmish, I would say, with a rubber dinghy that was coming from Lebanon, trying to penetrate. And they spent this type of a lot of 76, but you know, rubber dinghy is a small one, and they went out. They were running in circles around them, and they even managed to shoot out an RPG, which luckily didn't hit. So it was decided to take off for these patrols one of the missile turrets and put in something that you can shoot right next to the boat. And that's how we got to one day before the 73 war. Now, then there was the sinking of Eilat. As I said, we had the war in 67. 3 weeks after the war, this is a World War II destroyer, the only one that was, very quickly got back into shape for the 6-day war. And they were sunk near Port Said with 39, we lost 39 men there.
Is it a trouble class?
I'm sorry?
Is that an ex-trouble class?
I think you're right. It's a British destroyer. Yes, you may be right. Okay, so, and this was, we weren't surprised by anything. They shouldn't have been there. But it did drive home how fatal it can be if you're not prepared, and if you're not prepared, especially to fight missiles. Oh, I'm sorry, now what happened? I think okay, I'm putting this not to show how megalomaniac we are, but to explain that up there is, where is it? Little Israel. All of a sudden, we have, after the 6-day war, we had all of the Sinai. All of the Sinai, and the coastline suddenly became 3 times or 4 times longer, more. Now, we also had interests in the Red Sea because at that time we were in very good terms with Iran, and all our oil was coming from Iran. Not only was it coming from Iran, there was a pipeline through Israel which bypassed the Suez and everything, which brought the Iranian oil by ship, by tankers to Eilat on the Red Sea, and from there by pipe to Mediterranean ports and so forth. So it was very important also economically, not just security. Now the Suez Canal was close to us, close to everybody post 6-day war, and we were building in Israeli shipyards a vessel for that kind of sea, because the only way to get the vessels there was to sail all around Africa, 12,000 miles up to the tip of Sinai, Sharm el-Sheikh, where we had a naval base. So, just an anecdote. We went back to the German designer, Lucen, and explained to him what we want. We want something that does everything that the smaller 250-ton boats does, but it has to go around Africa, meaning Indian Ocean, Sea State 10, hurricanes, and so forth. And the story in the Navy that he said, "You don't want a grand piano too?" But he came up with a design which was actually a blow-up of the original boats. The original boats were like 44 meters, 240 tons. This was 62 meters, 400 tons. And the main thing was that they could go, that they were very long-legged. In order for the engineers to be able to work on any type of the boats, we didn't change the engine. 4 MTU engines, high speed, but a bigger boat, which meant that it was a little slower, like 34 knots instead of the 40 knots. But it was a good decision. And they were built in Israel. Just to give you an idea of how far they can go, in 1976, later, 3 years forward, the Americans had the bicentennial, and they invited navies from all over the world, and we sent 2 of these missile boats. They crossed the Atlantic, on their own, no refueling, and stayed there, went all through the East Coast, and then down to South America because the industry here in Israel wanted to try and sell them over there, and so forth. And back to Israel. Excellent boats, excellent boats. Okay, so let's go forward. This is the SAR 4. Beautiful boat, the best boat I ever commanded. It has a 76 millimeter in front, 76 millimeter in aft, and it could carry 8 of these missiles. This was a very strong vessel, and it could go all down the Red Sea at 30 knots. This is 1,000 miles. Stay there, and then come back at 30 knots. And the Red Sea at that time, we had Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Sudan. Nobody was friendly there, and no air cover, nothing. And we did a lot of, I'm talking post-73, a lot of patrols down Bab el-Mandeb and all that area where today they have pirates, and they performed beautifully.
What was your crew size?
I'm sorry?
How big was the crew?
44. We always, on the longer trips, we used to take with us some more people because there was always someone who wanted from. But the crew, it could be fought with less, by the way. There were, I mean, we could make our own water, food, everything. It was great boats. Just an anecdote. I don't know if we had the time. I was liaising on one of the trips that the boats went around because they went in pairs around Africa. I was liaising with the South African Navy, and we met at that time. They still had, it was big South Africa at that time. They had Wolfish Bay, which is today it's. That time they called it Southwest Africa, but today Namibia. Sorry, and I suggested to the officer from the South African Navy was with me that he take the trip from there to Cape Town, which is about 700 miles, and he said okay, and I said okay, see you tomorrow, and he said what do you mean tomorrow? In 3 days? I said no, tomorrow. And he didn't believe it, but it took him 24 hours and they were there. Fantastic boats. Okay. Okay. Now concept of operation. That was all very nice what I told you, but we have to get down to business. There's the Styx, 50 kilometers. There's the Gabriel, 20 kilometers. We have to do something about that. The idea was to use okay. The idea was to use our superiority in detection, to be able to detect them without their detecting us by using our radar detection systems, which were very, very good, very sophisticated, very accurate. Triangulate, know where they are, call the Air Force to help us cross the gap and come in. If the Air Force did the job, wonderful. If not, we'll finish them off. That was the basic idea. So, early detection, that was the idea. Airstrike, use tactical chaff. This was, I'm not sure it was the first time, but we use it heavily. I'm saying tactical chaff. Chaff, for anyone who doesn't know, is, you all know what it is? Okay. So tactical chaff is, it looks, at least at the beginning, when you shoot it, as a target on the screen. And it's even a stronger target than, I mean, our idea was that they see the chaff before they see us. And it worked beautifully. It goes with the wind, and it opens up. But we had rockets that could go something like 12 kilometers, so right away, very far from us. The idea was tactical chaff to make them expend their missiles, rush in on the attack, and a lot was spent on anti-missile tactics and electronics, chaff too, everything that we could develop for it, we did. And a lot of training. A lot of training. We knew that our lives depended on it. Electronic countermeasures, please.
Was that an onboard jammer or a...
On board. No, on board. The jammers were on board. The chaff were rockets that I mean, today it's not classified anymore. The idea was very dangerous. We knew that the Styx flies and at a certain and looks for its target from infinity towards itself. So the idea was that we shoot the rocket. I'm talking about the these ones, the ECM. Shoot them very close to the vessel. So if he's already locked on us, we are rushing towards the missile or towards the enemy at 40 knots, and the chaff stays behind, so the missile will stay with that. But that's very dangerous because he might not decide to, and we're actually making our target much bigger. We tried it in different ways. We didn't have a Styx missile, but we used, for instance, the Air Force. They had the Phantoms, so they would lock on us, and we'd say to the pilot, "You go after your lock. Don't look." I mean, at 100 meters, which is the 300 feet above the sea, and it worked. It worked. Except when we didn't shoot it in the right direction with the wind. You had to know where the wind comes, because if the wind is coming from there and you're shooting it on this side, it's passing here, and it happened during the war. I'll explain. I'll show if we have time. I'll show about it. And tight control. From all our simulations and training, we understood that this is going to be very difficult to understand who's who. So we did a lot of drills in a special simulator that was built for it. And I can tell you, I'm not talking about this specific battle, but a battle that we had 3 days later with the Egyptians. I remember one of the commanders was exclaiming on the wireless, "Wow, it's just like the simulator," which is the best thing you can say about a simulator. But we also drilled a lot at sea. So what was the order of battle? Destroyers, the Egyptians had 5 of these. Syria had none, and we had none. Missile boats, they had 19 of them. Komars and Shershens, 9 in Syria, so there's 28 against us, 12. Now these 12, by the way, include, I'm sorry. Then you have torpedo boat, gunboats, and so forth. At 42, 14, we had 2, those SAR ones that I told about. Submarines, we had none, they had 12 of them. But this meant that we had to leave some of our submarine chasing missile boats near our coast. Okay. The war broke on October 6, 1973. It's a Saturday, and it's on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which is the holiest day in the Jewish religion. And you've been now in Israel, and you've seen that not everybody is religious. Still, it's a closed country. Nobody's out. They're either in the synagogues or at home. Nothing is moving on this particular day, and they cleverly enough chose to attack on that day, and it was a surprise attack. Noon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, both the Syrians and the Egyptians mounted a major attack on the borders. I said a surprise attack, except for the Navy. What happened was that the chief intelligence officer of the Navy for several weeks was saying, "Listen, there's going to be a war. They're preparing for war." He had his own signs. For instance, the Russians left Port Said. The Russians were in the Egyptian ports. They had left. He said, "This is a sure sign of war." He had other signs, but he couldn't convince the rest of the intelligence community. And he went to the Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Navy went with him to the Commander-in-Chief of the whole armed forces and said, "You have to listen to him." And he didn't accept his word too, because he had his intelligence, or his intelligence guy. So he said to him, to the commander-in-chief of the Navy, if you think there's a war, prepare for war. Just like that. I'm saying that because 2 days before, we had a major drill, nothing to do with the war. And two of the boats, those SAR-4 boats, that were meant for going around Africa, were on a training trip voyage in the Mediterranean, and on the way back they were used as if they were enemy destroyers attacking Israel, and the whole of the Navy was out. This is Thursday night. So we were out all night. Friday morning, remember the war is the next day. Friday morning we were all at the in the briefing, and the commander of the flotilla comes in 7 o'clock in the morning, Friday, more than 24 hours before the war, says, we're not going to have a debriefing, go to your boats, prepare them for war. And by preparing them for war, what we meant, there was a lot of logistics, because remember those 20 millimeters guns, we had to take them off, put the missiles. And when you put the missiles, you have to check the missiles. It's a long process. We never went out with the full load of fuel, because it just makes the boats heavy. And full load of ammunition, so forth. At about midnight, between Friday and Saturday, we were ready. I was at that time the operations officer of the flotilla. I went to sleep at about 12 o'clock. 4 o'clock in the morning, they wake me up, and I'm a mere lieutenant at that time, and come back to the base. I go back to the base. I lived very close, and the word was that today, I mean it's 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, 6 o'clock in the evening, there's going to be a war. Now, from what I learned much later, at that time, the head of the Mossad made a trip to London to speak with the top spy that we had at the time, and he told him about the intended attack at 6 o'clock. To this day, there's a controversy whether he was a double agent, and that on purpose he said 6 o'clock because they were sure that we already understand that there's going to be a war. They just wanted to throw us off for a few hours. It's a controversy we don't know, because he met sudden death, this guy. Anyway, now I know that the head of the Mossad called Golda Meir from London and told her that. And this happened at something around 3 o'clock in the morning. Me, a mere lieutenant, I got the word 4 o'clock. Fantastic way. Now, I don't know if you know, but unfortunately, the guys who really got the brunt of the attack on the borders, they never knew what hit them when the war started. So, what we decided to do was send out the boats, some of them towards the Egyptian side, some of them to Syria, as, you know, like radar pickets, because we didn't know exactly what is going to happen. We didn't know for sure that it's going to be a war. And this is all Navy decision, nothing to do with the headquarters. And of course, some boats were left to guard against submarines. And the flotilla commander didn't want to decide which way he's going. So he said, leave one boat in port. I remember around 1:30, I'm walking in the piers, and it's deserted. There's only this boat waiting for us. And I got back to him and said, listen, if we don't go out, we'll miss the war. And we went out, and he was trying to decide which way to go. Egypt, I mean, nobody could have known that there's going to be such a long war and so forth, and he couldn't decide. We had sent 4 boats north of Haifa. This is a SAR-3, if I remember. These two are SAR-3. This is a SAR-4, the new type of boat, the one that was supposed to go around Africa. And this is a SAR-1. But the squadron leader was on that boat, there's more room there and so forth because there was no armament there. He made a big mistake. No missiles, nothing. So it's actually 3 missiles boat are there waiting for orders. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, let's go to Syria. That's how he decided. So he joins 5:30 by the time we joined them. When we left the port, the sirens started. And we understood there's a war, and after a short while, headquarters said that there was an invasion and it's full war. On the spot, he decided we're not staying here. We're going north. I mean, that was not the original plan. The original plan was to wait for them somewhere here in the front of Lebanon. Lebanon didn't have a navy to speak of, so we could do what we liked there. But going up to Syria meant that we would be out of air cover. But he was very aggressive. 1900, you can see it there, 7 o'clock, it's already very dark. We are something like 40 miles offshore. And we get, you remember that triangulation? Syrian missile boats out there. Immediately, according to protocol, we called up the Air Force, and of course they didn't come. Because, and I can't blame them, they had a lot on their hands. They were the ones who were stopping, well, not in the Sinai, but at least in Syria, there was nothing. I mean, in Syria, you can tell thousands of, I don't know how many tanks were against 180 tanks. Or
They had it all.
They had it all already, okay. And at least for the first 12 hours, the brunt of the attack was taken by the Air Force. And I can't blame them for not coming to help these Navy guys. I think the fantastic thing was that the squadron commander, the flotilla commander, realized that. And after about 5 minutes, he said, I'm not going to wait for them. And in spite of all, the rules of engagement and everything, we decided to attack, started rushing in at the distance that and of course, chaff, I mean the tactical chaff, at the distance that we should have seen them on the screens. We opened our radars, nothing. So he lost heart a little, and we stopped the attack, regrouped, and then it was decided. It was decided to go around. You can't see it, but up there is Turkey, and try and surprise them from to come from the Turkish, not from the south, from Israel. Then, at around 20 to 30. There's this whole, arm to the teeth and all. So we get we didn't see the target at first. At first we only got the radar. And the radar was the radar of a very small torpedo boat that we knew. It's a Soviet torpedo boat, but we knew that the Syrians had it. It's called K-123. It's a very small vessel, I think 16 meters, 50 knots, very high speed, small crew. And now we didn't know what it was. I mean, it didn't make sense. One small vessel so far out. It was very easy. We fired a warning shot, and the guy made the big mistake. He fired back. He fired back and put on those 50 knots. And all these are now fighting to fight against him. And he got every kind, except missiles of course, every kind of bullet that we could put into him, the poor guy, and stopped in his track. And then the squadron, we didn't still know what's going to happen. The squadron, the flotilla commander said, I'm not leaving this guy afloat. Again, it's made of wood, so it doesn't sink easily. So one of the boats, this one, was dispatched to finish it off by a machine gun, not the men, but the vessel itself. And the reason this one was chosen, because they didn't have time to take, for against the terrorists, we had a very big searchlight on the vessel, you know, to be able to look at them from something like 2,000 meters and shoot at them. So that was the reason this one was picked. And the rest of us started going a little to the northwest because we supposed that they had warned off, which they did, the Syrians. So now we are down to 3 missile boats and a gunboat. Again, a mistake, because we should have left the gunboat there. This was something they could do easily without the searchlight. Okay. Next thing, there's a new target, and immediately identified again by its radar as a T-42. T-42 is a mine-laying vessel, maybe also a minesweeper. I think it's only a mine-laying vessel. Big target. So it was decided to sink it, and that it was worth a missile. By the way, because we weren't sure yet how the missiles would perform, I mean, we didn't shoot that many in the training. The normal procedure was to shoot one. These are, I won't go into it. Anyway, to shoot a second one a minute later, even before the first one hit. Yeah, shoot, look, exactly. In this case, because we knew it wasn't a missile boat, we decided to waste only one missile on it. It hit, dead in the water, but it didn't sink. And later, this one that had finished off, it became the sweeper of the fleet and said, finish that one off. Then, incoming missiles from southeast. What happened was, in my opinion, personal opinion, those guys down there, they were just leaving port, and maybe our triangulation wasn't that very accurate. And they went out on patrol. They didn't know anything about us until they heard from the torpedo boat. Now, when we started going in on the minesweeper or mine layer, we put out chaff, the tactical chaff. They saw that and they shot against it. For, I mean, 12 kilometers, when they're shooting from 40 kilometers or something like that, it looks like it's being fired at you. And all of a sudden, we are really inside a battle, a missile battle, everything we trained for. And you have to understand, these missiles are very, very big. It's a big ball of fire on the horizon coming at you. It looks low on the horizon, but it isn't that low. And it's coming against you. And we all turned against it, doing all the anti-missile tactics, including telling the headquarters. It was my job to tell the headquarters that we were being fired, and I can imagine what they felt over at headquarters, because everything was quiet all of a sudden, and it takes something like 2.5 minutes until the missiles arrive, and we are not in range yet for our missiles. And it worked. I mean, our missiles, their missiles missed. Some of them quite close, some of them were shot down, but they all missed. I don't think by chance. They missed because the tactics work. And we got into range. We even had enough time to say, you take this one and you take this one, and so forth. 2 of these were OSAs with the 4 missiles, because they managed to shoot another salvo. By this time, we were already in range, and there's even a fantastic picture. I couldn't lay my hands on it for the presentation here. Fantastic picture where you see 2 Styx missiles, big balls of fire coming, and underneath it you see 2 small Gabriels, you know, very small, you know, but they hit. And I remember in one case, the second missile that was shot, we said, shoot, shoot, look. The second missile didn't find the target. I mean, probably it hit the missile that was still on deck, and the vessel exploded. One vessel, decided on a different tactic. They went straight for shore. And they went aground, and the squadron commander, the flotilla commander, I keep messing it up, said, I'm not leaving them here. And we the vessel that we were on, we came as close as we could. You know, it was very shallow, as close as we could. And from there's a way to shoot with the guns, you know, bore sight. And he himself went into the gun turret to make sure. And it was burning. You know, it looked like you know, when naval vessels visit a port and you have these lights. Exactly, that's how it looked. It was burning from stern to stern. And the Navy headquarters saying, "Okay, enough is enough." This is almost midnight. And we left. Now, let's do a quick wrap-up. And I called it Elements of a Clean Sweep. Force build-up for the next war. It sounds obvious, but most of us make the mistake of preparing for the war that we just ended. Development of a detailed concept of operation and continuous training at all levels. And when I'm saying all levels, some of the training, for instance, that exercise that we did 2 days before, it included the Chief of the Navy. He was at the Navy headquarters and he played his part in deciding go this, do that, and so forth. Excellent intelligence before and I mean in our preparations, and also during the skirmishes. In some cases we had very good intelligence. Extremely important. Very, very short chain of command. I mean, the flotilla commander was speaking with the Chief of the Navy. No one in between. Sometimes he was, you know, taken up with dealing with the attack. So I was talking with the Chief of the Navy, and he even recognized my voice, he said later. So very short. By the way, these are the two guys. This is the then Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, Admiral Telem, who was the first flotilla commander of these boats. And this guy, I mean, both of them are unfortunately not alive anymore. He's the flotilla commander, a very colorful guy, ex-submarine commander, by the way. And he brought a lot of submarine tactics, submarine thinking into our flotilla, and especially the meticulous, anybody who knows submarines, they're very meticulous about details, rightfully so, because otherwise they won't be alive. And a lot goes to him. He got a medal after this war. Aggressive attitude. He was very, very aggressive. At the same time, the other part of the flotilla had something similar, not the same, with the Egyptians, and nothing came out of it. I mean, only one missile boat, the rest of them fled, because he waited for the Air Force. Now, this is a medal or court-martial decision. And his way of thinking was nothing stays afloat. Just a second. Just 3 words about the aftermath. 2 nights later, we had another decisive clean sweep, this time against the Egyptian Navy. This is called the Battle of Baltim. This happened also very far from our shores. And it was that's the battle that I was talking about that was exactly as simulated. It was unbelievable how exact it was. And the Egyptian and the Syrian navies never, till the end of the war, if they came out of port, it was to shoot at us missiles from the entrance and nip back, which meant that we could do whatever we want. And it came even to the point, at a certain point I got command of a vessel during the war, and I was sent as a lone vessel to the same place in Syria just to bombard their fueling facilities, and the idea was to try and take the pressure off the Golan Heights. And this is what happened. I got into a duel with tanks on shore, which meant that they weren't at the Golan Heights. I think that's it. Complete sea control, and thank you.